Hello and welcome to Simply Cyber Live. I'm your host, Gerald Ogier, and every Thursday we talk with experts to help you take your cyber career further, faster. Today I'm joined with close personal friend and fellow cohort member of a PhD program, Dr. Cory Nance. Cory is an assistant professor at the Citadel in the Cybersecurity and Computer Science department. He holds a PhD in cyber operations and has worked in academia/higher ed since 2013. So let's bring Cory into the studio here. There we go. Hey, Cory, how you doing?
Hey, Jerry, good to see you.
Yeah, man, thanks for being here. So today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, but specifically within higher education and in the curriculum perspective. So, I kind of gave you a little bit of an intro, but can you kind of just let people know about what your background is and why you're really an ideal person to talk about this?
Sure. So, education background, I have a BS and an MS in computer science, and then I went to Dakota State with you, and we did the PhD in cyber operations. Around 2013, I started teaching computer science full time at Coastal Carolina University, and we created a cybersecurity minor. And last year, I came to the Citadel, and we have quite a few programs there as well that are cyber focused.
Nice. So, I guess since you've been around it so long, I guess can you kind of share what your thoughts and perspective is on kind of where cybersecurity has come from? And really, I want to focus on what's the current state of cybersecurity in academia. Because, up until not too long ago, it was basically like a flavor of IT, right? I mean, it only recently got its own place in the sun, if you will.
Absolutely. So cybersecurity, as you were just saying, is a very new field. A lot of schools you look at don't have degrees specifically in cyber yet. They're still sort of specializations or minors that are bolted onto a degree in information systems, computer science, or IT. However, we are starting to see a lot more bachelor degree programs that are focused 100% on cybersecurity.
Yeah. So, Cory and I both went through a PhD in cyber operations, which is like, I don't want to call it newfangled, but I mean, it's certainly uncommon, but it was a great program and I had a wonderful experience. Are you seeing that there's more of an explosion at the undergraduate level or the graduate level? What are you kind of seeing where they're starting to build the programs?
Absolutely. I think it's taken place in both levels, but, when freshmen come in or the year before when they're interviewing schools, that's one of the top things that they ask about is what sort of cyber programs you have. So the young folks coming in are really eager to get involved with that. And I think they look for those type of programs now as they're trying to figure out what school to go to.
Yeah. And I've also noticed, with having worked in cybersecurity for so long, originally it was like securing IT. Again, it's just like you're either a software developer or an IT person, and you were thinking within that lens of what security is. And nowadays, I mean, there's defensive tracks, there's offensive tracks, there's risk and compliance, there's privacy. I mean, you can go really many, many different ways. So are you seeing, potential students visiting and stuff? They're asking or they're thinking like, I want to do cybersecurity because of offensive, defensive, or what's the kind of attitude of those potential candidates, if you will?
That's a really good question, something to be aware of, especially if you're someone looking for a program. I don't see a lot of students coming in specifically looking for offensive or defensive. Maybe they haven't dived that deep into the field yet, so they're mainly interested in cyber in general. But if you do have an idea of which direction you want to go, that certainly helps you pick out a program. Because like you were saying, some programs focus more on policy and risk assessment, and then you have some that are highly technical on the other side. And, depending on what you want to do, picking the right one is very important so you're not sort of backtracking.
Yeah, and I had a question here, and I'll bring it up. What's a cybersecurity program like at the Citadel? And I'd like you to answer that. But I also am wondering, I guess, too close to the forest to see the trees. Where I'm thinking, like, obviously, you have a niche of offensive or defensive, but is the program at the Citadel, and are you seeing programs in general at the undergraduate level more balanced to really give that, exploratory opportunity for students to find where their passion is?
Yeah, definitely. I think most of them are balanced, and usually what you learn in an offensive class can be used to inform you on what you would do defensively. So I think they do kind of go hand in hand as well. So at the Citadel, and I guess just to back up, one of the things that I think helps when you're picking a program is to look at accreditations and other programs that the school is a part of. So the Citadel is a part of a program done by the National Security Agency and Department of Homeland Security called CAE, which is Centers of Academic Excellence. And they designate programs based upon those programs meeting certain knowledge units. So it kind of standardizes the programs a little bit. They can specialize and move around in some of the different optional ones. But that combined with accrediting agencies like ABET just recently came out with a cybersecurity accreditation that I'm sure many computer science schools will want to go after. And those can tell you if you're getting a quality education and across the board, if it's, even with what other schools are doing as well. So,
okay. Yeah. So are you saying then that there's accreditation boards are defining standards that regardless of the program, if it's going to be accredited, it's going to meet this spectrum of whatever?
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that helps ensure quality in programs. Not to say that a program that's not designated or not accredited isn't great, because even in computer science, we've had ABET accreditation for a long time. There's some schools out there that are not ABET accredited that have great curriculum, and it looks like they could be ABET accredited, but maybe their focus was somewhere else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what is the cybersecurity program like at the Citadel?
Yeah. So let me get back to answer the question at hand here. So
Yeah.
We are CAE designated at the Citadel. There's two tracks for CAE. One is cyber defense education, and the other one's cyber operations. So right now we're cyber defense, and the pathway for that is to do the Bachelors of Science in Computer Science and combine that with our cybersecurity minor. So the two of those meet the knowledge units that the CAE specifies for cyber defense. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, in the fall, we're starting a new degree program, Bachelors of Science in Cyber Operations. And
nice.
As that sounds, we're aligning. This program was built from the ground up to align with the CAE's cyber operations knowledge units.
Yeah, and I can't think of a more appropriate professor to be working that than someone who has a PhD in cyber operations.
Right. Yeah. There's not many of us out there who can say that we have a PhD in cyber ops.
So we have a question from the audience. Friend of the show, John Helmus, asked, he wanted your opinion on the lack of offensive security in higher ed academia curriculums.
There is a lack of that. And I'm not sure if it's faculty that aren't prepared to teach it, or the amount of legwork behind it to set it up with labs and everything. That's one thing that I think the CAE's cyber operations knowledge units pair up well with. And in our program, that's something we're going to do, is be focusing on some of those more offensive side things than, in addition to the defensive stuff that the students are already learning.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I feel like, you can read a book and you can watch a video or listen to someone on how operations work, but you really got to get your hands in there on the keyboard, break stuff, see you pop a shell, understand that you've just escalated your privileges and whatnot, and you can't have students doing that on their own laptop. You know what I mean? Like you can't break their own devices. So having those labs, I'd be curious, have you heard of any, and we could be vendor agnostic here, of any vendors that are trying to offer that platform? I mean, John himself is like a huge AWS guy, and I know that there's third parties that will use AWS to sell solutions. I'm wondering if there's offensive cyber ranges, for lack of a better term, that are being offered up to academia.
Absolutely. There's actually a good handful of those out there, and they range in, what it is that they're targeting as far as skill sets for what they're trying to teach. But it goes, all the way up from basic to really advanced cyber ranges. A huge downside of that is that they're really expensive, and I think that's prohibitive for a lot of schools unless they can get grants or have big funding from the upper administration. It's going to be tough to get access to stuff like that for the students.
Yeah. So when you say expensive, are you talking about on-prem cyber ranges, or are you talking even the cloud-based ones are also expensive?
Even the cloud-based ones for a couple hours can be really expensive. That's more on the high end, though, when you get into upper level classes and you're doing those offensive type operations. The lower stuff, though, there are textbook publishers that are putting out content that has virtual machines with it and virtual machine labs with several of them. There's also vendors that have their own product that's not that pricey.
So with the Citadel cyber ops program that you guys are starting in the fall, it's a bachelor's degree, right? Focused on cyber ops?
It is. It's a Bachelor's of Science.
Okay. And is the expectation that a student could graduate with this degree and then be, operational in the field, be able to go in and either, be a pen tester, which is kind of the obvious thing, or go run operations or what have you?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're trying to give them that skill set so they're ready day one to hit the workforce. Just as an aside, as part of being a CAE school, there's a lot of scholarship and internship opportunities that get made available to our students, and a lot of them take advantage of that. So they're already working prior to going out into the workforce, and some of them already have agencies that are ready to hire them full time once they graduate.
Oh, what an awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
I remember when I was undergrad, like getting a job was, kind of like what you're thinking of. That's like the next step is to go get a job, so to have that opportunity for them kind of baked in is really fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, kind of taking it bigger picture, what gaps or areas of improvement do you see? Like, we're here, but it'd be better if we were there. What's there look like?
So I think the biggest gap is, and we kind of already addressed it, is that hands-on aspect, that students need to be hands-on, experimenting and putting into practice the theories and lessons that we're teaching them in the classroom. And we're starting to see that as you got to with talking about vendors and the affordability of being able to bring that into the classroom. As I mentioned, when we get to the upper level, it gets more and more pricey, and I think that's where it gets prohibitive for schools to really embrace that curriculum and teach it. But there are schools that are working around that, like some do consortiums where a few schools will come together and pool resources in order to set up that cyber range for their students.
Yeah. I could see it too. Like one of the things that I loved about, my DSU PhD experience, and I'm sure you got the same experience, was, because cybersecurity as a field is constantly changing because of the cat and mouse paradigm of threat actors and defenders. I found looking at real examples of things that are right now, Maze ransomware is huge right now. So looking at Maze, or at the time, Angler Exploit Kit was big at the time, and we were looking at that. And I feel like that can be a challenge, right? Because the professor, if you will, or whoever's doing the instruction, they have to understand it to be able to convey it to the students. But if it's brand new, that research needs to be done. And that's a bit of a lift for, to be able to be academic and teach and understand, developing new research and stuff like that. So I think that would be like somewhere nice if there was kind of hook-ins to security research facilities, maybe not facilities, but like, Talos or something like that. Cisco Talos, who does like security research, and RSA, I think they have some. But anyways, the point is, like, it would be cool if there was a hook into higher ed or academia to be able to provide that kind of breakdown of whatever the new threat is. So when they're coming out, not only do they have core competency, but they have like understanding of the current state of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. The field moves so fast. So, and you're absolutely right. Being an academic is it's sometimes like trying to stand on a stool with three legs. You have, teaching, service, and research that you're trying to do. And also when you're teaching cyber, it's a field that's constantly changing. So you also need to be up on that. And hopefully you can integrate that with your research. And ideally, your administration is really receptive and provides you with, opportunities and funding to do trainings, because that's what ultimately benefits the students, is to be able to bring that back into the classroom.
Yes. So, a question I didn't prep you for prior. So yesterday I posted on LinkedIn a little video about like, is cybersecurity a good job for you? Right? Because it's not for everybody. I'm sorry. Like, with all due respect, it's not for everybody. So one of the 3 things that I identified as, ask yourself about this, and if yes, then maybe cyber is good for you, is you need to understand technology, right? You can't not understand. You don't have to understand how BGP works or how routing span trees are and stuff like that, but you have to understand what an IP address is and how a network works at the TCP/IP kind of layer or levels. So with traditional schools or programs, it was computer science, security focus, right? But you were getting that foundational computer science education, which I think is critical for long-term success in the field. With the cybersecurity program, you're not requiring that computer science element. So how is a cybersecurity program ensuring that level of technical competency?
That's actually a really good question. So ours specifically, the BS in cyber operations, is 90% of a computer science degree. There's 1 or 2 classes that you wouldn't take. Some students opt to double major so that they, or we have students planning to double major because that's coming out in the fall, where they'll finish up their CS degree and also finish up the classes that are different in cyber operations. I think that's a really good approach because having that theory and the understanding is important, but we're also baking that into our cyber operations program, so they're not missing out on that element. I think that some schools, you need to make sure that the prereqs on the course actually prepare the student to do that material. It's hard to talk about, SYN flood attacks if you're not familiar with the TCP handshake. And you can really get into the weeds teaching the background networking knowledge and not really focusing on the cybersecurity. So prereqs got to be correct on courses for students to actually get the cyber out of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, completely anonymous, completely almost aggregated statistical question I've got for you. What do you see the undergrads who are looking at cybersecurity, like, where is the stumbling blocks? I feel like personally, like, I'm so far removed from it that like I just don't understand whether like knowing that there's offense and defense. I take that as like an obvious assumption, but it's not. So, I guess from your perspective, what are you seeing as kind of those consistent stumbling blocks, and how is the curriculum addressing that?
So I think we have to back up and go back to that prerequisite knowledge, because that's usually the stumbling blocks. Once someone gets past that prerequisite knowledge, they can do the cyber, and it's more of, is their heart in it or not? It's not, they can't understand this or they have problems with this concept. So the stumbling blocks that I see the most are CS 1 and 2. Those are your intro to programming classes where you're learning about algorithms. Lots of times it's a student's first language, and they struggle with the syntax and just the flow of writing a program. If they get past that, sometimes data structures or assembly programming will be another stumbling point. So you're getting a little bit lower level at that point, which someone can still be very successful at cyber without knowing anything about assembly, obviously. And then lastly, outside of computer science, most of these degrees require a few courses in higher level math, like discrete mathematics, Calc 1 and 2. Sometimes those can be roadblocks for students as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. I know, with software development, and, everybody that's ever become a developer or done programming or something like that has definitely experienced the missing semicolon, if you're that guy or whatever. And then assembly, at least with higher level programming languages, you can read the source code to some level and figure out what's going on. When you get to assembly, there's no, like, sub is pretty much the only word, or add, or like the only actual words. Everything else is like, a different language. So that, I think that is why those stumbling blocks come up, So as far as, so I know that the accreditation board is defining, the wide picture of what the curriculum has got to be. Has it evolved in any way or been influenced in any way by industry? So, hey, this is what we would like to see coming out of school versus, once you get here, we're going to train you up in whatever. So, like, how is industry influencing the curriculum?
Yeah, so industry is definitely involved in an advisory type role. Any school has an advisory board for their programs as part of accreditation. We certainly do at the Citadel with lots of members from industry who once a year we meet with, and they look at the curriculum and give us suggestions on how to improve it to make sure that our students are coming out well prepared for careers in their field. I think that industry also, well, I'm probably assuming here, but I think that they were involved a little bit with the CAE. The NSA is obviously heavily involved with that, and they're very up on cybersecurity and know what students need to know in order to work for them. Yeah.
And I could see, I think it was maybe 10, 12 years ago, there was an identified need for cybersecurity skill within the workforce. And you hear about it all the time. There's a shortage of skills, shortage of people, shortage. And I feel like, the NSA or whoever really said, we've got to get them younger, right? Like, I mean, STEM is kind of a big thing now, even though there's no C in STEM, right? But pushing down and getting that education, getting that awareness in there, so when they're coming up, then they'll know about it. And then with the programs in place, they'll be able to have the opportunities to really bear down and focus on cybersecurity. So I kind of see that. I mean, that's like one of those bigger, like strategic kind of things that takes 10 years to really bake in the oven for 10 years. And then finally it can come out and you can begin to reap the benefits of those opportunities. So
that's right. Yeah. So it's always tough to get the pipeline started, but once it is, you're pumping out.
Yeah, absolutely. So how, I'm curious, like, you had mentioned consortiums earlier of schools, but you didn't, necessarily mention the Citadel. How much is, in your experience, how much are you seeing higher eds kind of co-collaborate on programs, best practices, lessons, those type of things? Like, what's that like?
Yeah. So, I've been involved in computer science for about 7 years now. When I started getting more and more involved in cybersecurity, it's just amazing the amount of collaboration that takes place in this space. I think you see it on the industry side too, at least with not industries necessarily collaborating, but just the community themselves. If you go to a B-Side conference, like, everyone's excited to help you, and it's not a closed sort of society. And I feel the same way in academia. There's a lot of information sharing, sharing lessons plans and assignments, and willing to collaborate to share resources. So that's really great.
Oh, that is good. Yeah. And I work at an academic medical center, which is, a university among other things. And EDUCAUSE, which is, REN ISAC, EDUCAUSE, those are kind of institutions that bind all of the higher ed places together, but more on the corporate infrastructure side, less on the academic faculty side. But anyways, the point is, within higher ed, there is this, like, we're all on the same boat. Like, we all got to help each other out. Let's all share intel and stuff like that. So it's interesting, but not surprising to me that on the faculty side, there is that collaboration. And one of the reasons I personally love cybersecurity is because of the community, which is why I'm doing SimplyCyber, right?
Absolutely. The community is amazing.
Yeah. So do you have any final thoughts, Cory, about cybersecurity in academia and higher education?
It's just such a new field. I really look forward to seeing where it goes in 10 years. We got a lot of neat programs established and also starting up at the Citadel. I'm excited to be a part of that and see where that goes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm happy to speak with you.
Yeah, so I was going to say, how do people get a hold of you? I mean, I guess your Twitter handle's right there on the screen.
Yep, that's my Twitter handle. LinkedIn, I should be probably tagged somewhere in the post, and my email address is cnance@citadel.edu. Perfect.
All right. Well, we've been talking with Cory Nance, Assistant Professor, Cybersecurity at the Citadel, and really driving a program there for the undergraduates. Thank you for being on the show today, Cory.
Thanks for having me, Jerry.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining the show. And until next week, stay secure.